3. You are the navigator, the Sentinel Architect. Part 1. The Invisible Battlefield, the story of blind trust. Chapter 1. The breach in the digital wall. Imagine you live in a medieval castle. You have built the ultimate defense. You have walls of stone 10 feet thick. You have a moat filled with crocodiles. You have a drawbridge made of iron. You have archers on the ramparts who can shoot a fly off a horse at 300 yards. You sleep soundly at night because you know that no armies on earth can batter down your gates. But then, one morning, you wake up to find the enemy sitting at your breakfast table eating your toast. The walls are not broken. The gate is still locked. The archers never fired a shot. How did they get in? They didn't break in. They walked up to the gatekeeper wearing the king's face and said, "Open the door." And the gatekeeper, trained to obey the king, lowered the bridge. This is the state of modern banking security. We have built a digital fortress of unprecedented strength. We have firewalls, encryption, biometric scanners, and anomaly detection systems that can spot a hacker's brute force attack from a mile away. We are experts at stopping the battering ram. But we are defenseless against the invite, the invisible adversary. We are fighting a new kind of war against a new kind of enemy. This enemy is a rational economic actor who has studied our blueprints. They know our walls are too strong to breach, so they have changed the geometry of the attack. In the old world, a bank robber wore a mask and attacked the perimeter. He was a physical threat that could be seen, measured, and stopped by a stronger wall. In the new world, the bank robber is an invisible adversary. They do not attack the perimeter. They attack the identity. They do not hack the bank's server. They hack the customer's mind. The romance scammer, Aisha's story. They spend months building a fake love affair, grooming the victim until she wants to send the money. To the bank system, this transaction looks perfect. It is authorized. It is authenticated. It is legitimate. The social engineer, Helen's story. They call a grandmother, posing as the bank's own fraud team. They convince her to read out the two-factor authentication code. She hands them the key to the castle because she thinks they are the guards. The enemy is not climbing the wall. They are walking through the front door, holding the hand of your customer. The vignette. Evelyn's wake-up call. Meet Evelyn. Evelyn is the Chief Information Security Officer, CISO, of a major bank. She is brilliant, rigorous, and proud of her fortress. She has spent $50 million on the latest cybersecurity tools. Her dashboard is green. Her perimeter is secure. One Tuesday morning, her phone rings. It is a customer named Tina. Tina is crying. They took everything, Tina says. My savings, my rent money, it's all gone. Evelyn pulls up the logs. She expects to see a hack. She expects to see a brute force attack from a foreign IP address. Instead, she sees nothing wrong. According to the snapshot security system, 9 a.m., Tina's phone logged into the app. Device verified. 9:05 a.m., Tina entered her correct password. Identity verified. 9:07 a.m., Tina entered the SMS one-time passcode. 2FA verified. 9:10 a.m., Tina transferred $15,000 to a new payee. Authorized. Evelyn looks at the screen. Tina, she says gently, our records show you authorized this. You entered the code. I didn't, Tina screams. My phone went dead. I lost signal for 2 hours. I never got a code. Evelyn freezes. She realizes, with a cold knot in her stomach, what happened. It was a SIM swap. The attacker didn't hack the bank. They called Tina's mobile phone provider, pretended to be her, and convinced a low-paid support agent to port her number to a new SIM card. The attacker became Tina. When the bank sent the secure SMS code, It went straight to the attacker's phone. The bank's fortress worked perfectly. It verified the code. It opened the gate. It welcomed the enemy in. The crisis of blind trust. In that moment, Evelyn realizes that her $50 million fortress is obsolete. She is relying on snapshot security. Her system asks only one question. Does the person holding the key look like the owner right now? It doesn't ask, why is the owner behaving this way? It doesn't ask, why did the owner's phone signal die 5 minutes before this transfer? It does not ask, why is the owner sending their life savings to an account flagged as a mule by another bank? She is looking at a single frame of a movie, and in that frame, everything looks normal. But if she could see the whole movie, the causal chain, she would see the crime in progress. This is the breach in the digital wall. It is not a failure of technology. It is a failure of context. We have built a system that trusts the credentials but has forgotten to protect the human. To fix this, we cannot just build higher walls. We need to change the way we see. We need to stop looking for intruders and start looking for betrayal. We need to become sentinels. Chapter 2. The Signal of Betrayal. Evelyn stood in the centre of the bank's war room. It looked less like a bank and more like the bridge of a sinking ship. On the giant screens, red dots pulsed across the globe. Malware signatures, brute force login attempts. Her team of analysts was shouting updates, chasing the anomalies. They were fighting the war they knew. They were fighting the war against the machine. But Evelyn wasn't looking at the screens. She was looking at a simple paper file on her desk. It was the file for Tina. There were no red dots on Tina's timeline. There were no malware alerts. According to the bank's $50 million defense system, Tina's account was healthy. It was green. And yet, Tina's life savings were gone. Evelyn realized she was looking at a systemic hallucination. The bank's immune system was perfect at detecting a virus, but it was completely blind to a betrayal. The Geometry of Betrayal. For 50 years, banking security has been built on the concept of the red flag. A red flag is a blunt instrument. It is a single tripwire designed for a dumb criminal. The modern enemy, the Invisible Adversary, is not a thief. They are a rational economic actor. They have reverse engineered the red flags, knowing exactly where the tripwires are. Evelyn traced the timeline of Tina's theft. The theft wasn't one big crash. It was a series of quiet, authorized whispers. Step 1, a SIM swap at the telco, invisible to the bank. Step 2, a password reset authorized. Step 3, a transfer of $15,000 authorized. The sequence was fatal. Evelyn realized her entire department was acting like an aspirin doctor, treating the symptom, the transaction, while the disease, the identity theft, raged on. The zero-sum trap. Evelyn pulled another file. This one belonged to the CFO of a major corporate client. 2 days ago, the CFO had made a legitimate transfer of $500,000. It kept a factory open. Evelyn looked at the two files side by side. Tina and the CFO, and then the cold reality of her position hit her. Her current security architecture, the one-size-fits-all policy, was a trap. If she tuned the system to be safe enough for Tina, for example, blocking every new payee addition or every large transfer, she would block the CFO. She would freeze the supply chain. She would break the business. If she tuned the system to let the CFO move fast, prioritizing flow and low friction, she would leave the door wide open for the hackers to destroy vulnerable customers like Helen and Tina. She felt a wave of nausea. She wasn't a sentinel. She was a manager being forced into a zero-sum choice. She had to choose who to fail. She realized the flaw wasn't in her vigilance. It was in her architecture. She looked at the case of Helen. She was 70. She needed friction and a system that shouted, "Stop! This is a scam!" She needed a bodyguard. She looked at Alex. He was the mule. He needed to be hunted down. He needed a predator. She looked at the CFO. He needed a system that got out of the way. He needed a teller. A single risk model could not be a bodyguard, a teller, and a predator at the same time. The era of the universal policy was over. The strategic pivot. Evelyn stood up and walked to the whiteboard. She realized that the stagnant mind wasn't just about slow software. It was about static identity. The bank was treating every customer as if they were the average user. She drew 3 distinct circles on the whiteboard. "We are done building one wall for a fortress that houses both the treasury and the nursery," she stated. "We must build specialised defence mandates." She labelled the circles with their mandates. 1. The shield, the bodyguard mandate. Its only job is user safety. 2. The sword, the hunter mandate. Its job is to actively find and neutralise fraud. 3. The gate, the teller mandate. Its job is fast, safe transactions for power users. Evelyn had identified the tension. Now she had named the solution. The multi-mine defence was not just a cool feature, it was an operational necessity. The next step was to build the tools required for those specific defence mandates. Part 2. The Sentinel's Shield. Chapter 3. The Sentinel's Vow, the Causal Mandate. If you were a detective investigating a murder, you would not just stare at the body. You would look for footprints. You would check the victim's phone. You would interview the neighbours. You would reconstruct the sequence of events that led to the crime. But in the world of banking, we have been trained to stare at the body, the final, irrevocable act of theft, and ask, is this signature real? The answer is usually yes, because the criminal made sure the signature was real. They stole the pen. They stole the hand. To defeat the invisible adversary, we must stop acting like security guards. Checking IDs at the door, we must start acting like detectives investigating a timeline. We must become sentinels. The shift from reaction to vigilance. A sentinel is not a passive observer. A sentinel is a causal analyst. Their job is not to wait for the red flag. Their job is to hunt for the blueprint of the attack before the attack happens. In The Signature Factory, Book 2, we learned that every complex event has a causal signature, a unique structural fingerprint that reveals its true nature. Fraud is no different. Fraud is not a random event. It is an engineered process that requires preparation and leaves traces. The mule ring. They need to set up a network of accounts to wash the money. This leaves a trace. The romance scammer. They need to build a persona and groom multiple victims simultaneously. This leaves a trace. The SIM swapper. They need to port a number and test the connection. This leaves a trace. These traces are invisible to the snapshot view, but to the sentinel they are glowing footprints in the snow. The causal compass. To see these footprints, the sentinel uses a new instrument, the causal compass. This is not a tool that measures risk as a single number. It is a tool that measures structure and sequence. Let's look at the case of Alex the Money Mule. To a traditional bank, Alex looks like a normal student. He receives money, he sends money. His balance is positive. But the sentinel points the causal compass at Alex's account and asks a structural question. What is the geometry of his money flow? The compass reveals a pattern, many to one, high velocity and threshold avoidance. The money arrives from multiple sources, sits in the account for less than 10 minutes, and is then sent to a single offshore account in amounts specifically designed to avoid old reporting thresholds. This geometry is the causal signature of a mule ring. It doesn't matter that Alex's password is correct. The structure of his behaviour proves he is part of a laundering machine. The Sentinel's vow and the multi-mind mandate. This realization changes the moral mandate of the bank. The Sentinel's vow is this: we will not hide behind the excuse of authorization. We will defend the customer against the betrayal of their own identity. When we see the signature of a mule ring, we do not wait for a police report. We act. When we see the signature of a romance scam, we pause. We ask questions. We move from being a processor of transactions to being a guardian of context. But there is a catch that Evelyn identified in Chapter 2. The defense must accommodate contradictory needs. Sometimes the geometry of life looks like the geometry of fraud. A large wire transfer might be a legitimate down payment, or it might be an investment scam. Therefore, the Sentinel's vow inherently requires a multi-mind defense. We must build a system that is specialised enough to 1. The shield, Bodyguard mandate, defend the vulnerable, Helen, with maximum friction and minimal risk, regardless of cost. 2. The sword, Hunter mandate, actively neutralise the professional threat, Alex, by prioritising speed and neutralisation. 3. The gate, Teller mandate, enable legitimate business, the CFO, by prioritising flow and minimum friction. The Sentinel must encode this specialisation. We must acknowledge that sometimes the machine will be blind to the human story. We need to build a weapon that knows when to stop firing. We need to forge the vector card. Chapter 4. Forging the glass box against the geometry of betrayal. The conference room on the 40th floor was cold. Evelyn stood at the head of the table. Sitting around her were the 5 most powerful people in the bank: the CEO, the CFO, the head of retail, and, most dangerously, Marcus, the general counsel. Marcus had a file in front of him. It was the lawsuit from Tina, the victim of the SIM swap. Evelyn, Marcus said, tapping the file. Our current fraud vendor uses a neural network. It costs us $20 million a year. They claim it has a 99% accuracy rate. Why did it fail to stop this? It didn't fail, Marcus, Evelyn said. It worked exactly as designed. The model saw a valid login. It saw a valid OTP. Mathematically, the risk score was low. Then, why are we being sued for negligence? Because the model is a black box, Evelyn replied. It can calculate probability, but it cannot understand context. And more importantly, when the regulator asks us why we let the money go, the black box cannot answer. It just shrugs. She projected a slide onto the wall. It was a diagram of a new, transparent architecture. I am proposing we turn off the black box, she said. I want to replace it with a glass box. The boardroom defense. The room went quiet. Turning off the primary fraud model was heresy. You want to replace a neural network with what? The CFO asked. Rules? No, Evelyn said. Not rules. Vector cards. She pointed to the screen. A rule is a blunt instrument. Block all transactions over $10,000. That kills the business. A vector card is a surgical contract. It is a self-contained unit of logic designed to detect the specific geometry of betrayal. She walked them through the defense of Tina. To catch a SIM swap, she explained, we cannot just look for a SIM change. That happens every time someone buys a new iPhone. We cannot just look for a new payee. That happens every time someone pays a plumber. We must look for co-occurrence. She showed them the logic script of the SIM swap vector card. I will only freeze the account if the SIM was swapped in the last 48 hours and the payee matches a known scam hot list. This logic, she said, looking at Marcus, is our legal defense. When we block a transaction, we are not guessing. We are proving that two independent risk signals have crossed paths. No regulator can argue with that geometry. It is the architecture of regulatory certainty. The human constraint, designing for humility. Marcus leaned forward. He was listening now. And what about the false positives? If you block a legitimate customer because they bought a new phone, they sue us too. That, Evelyn said, is why we need the human constraint. She reinforced the point she made in her Sentinel's vow: math has limits when faced with human nuance. She revealed the final component of the vector card design. It wasn't just a risk score. It was a new field. Human_context_required. Think about Tina, Evelyn added. If the fraudster had used a clean mule account that wasn't on our hot list, a rigid system would have let it through because it didn't fit the perfect red pattern. And if we blocked every SIM swap, we'd stop the business. The human constraint allows us to catch the cases that are tight but suspicious, the grey area where the math ends and the intuition begins. If the vector card sees a high-risk pattern but the signals are mixed, or if it sees a vulnerability _ flag on the account, it is forbidden from blocking. It must pause. It must set human_context_required to true. This forces the system to hand the decision to a human arbiter, she said. It ensures that we never let an algorithm make a life-altering decision for a vulnerable person without a human signature. This acknowledges the complexity of identity defense from the ground up. The green light. The CEO looked at the diagram. He looked at the lawsuit file. So, he said, you are building a system that can tell the difference between a probability and a proof. Yes, Evelyn said. And you can prove why it made every single decision? Marcus asked. Down to the millisecond, Evelyn said. It's all recorded in the Unbreaking Journal. Marcus closed the file. Do it, he said. Build the glass box. Evelyn let out a breath she didn't know she was holding. She had the mandate. She had the budget. Now, she just had to build a machine that could actually do it. She had to take this theoretical journal and turn it into a piece of engineering that could handle 50 million transactions a day without blinking. She left the boardroom and headed for the engineering bay. Chapter 5. The Unbreaking Journal in Finance. Evelyn had won the argument in the boardroom. She had the mandate to build the vector card, the logic that could detect betrayal. But logic is invisible. In a court of law or a regulatory audit, logic is just an opinion until it is proven. Marcus, the general counsel, didn't just want a new fraud model. He wanted an indestructible camera. He wanted assurance that the bank would never again face a lawsuit where they couldn't prove why a decision was made. The bank's current security was built on snapshot architecture. When a database updates a risk score or a balance, it physically overwrites history. To reconstruct what happened, you have to rely on messy, fragmented text files that can be lost, corrupted, or edited. Evelyn knew that if she wanted to survive the war against the invisible adversary, she couldn't just have better logs. She needed a witness that could not be bribed, threatened, or erased. She needed the Unbreaking Journal. The architecture of integrity, the enemy of truth, is not the lie. It is the eraser. In the digital world, the eraser is the update command. the ability to change the past without leaving a scar. Evelyn gathered her engineers. "We are deleting the eraser," she said. She laid out the new architecture. It was based on the immutable ledger concept. "From this moment on," she declared, "our fraud system is append only. We never update a row. We only add a new block. If a mistake is made, we do not erase it. We add a line to correct it." This was a profound choice. It meant that the bank was voluntarily giving up the power to hide its own mistakes. The override attempt. The true test of the journal came when a sophisticated hacker targeted Tina's account again. They were trying to move $15,000. The vector card from Chapter 4 fired instantly. Logic: SIM swap, hotlist, payee, action, hard freeze. The hacker, using social engineering, called the bank's support line and reached a junior agent named Ben. The hacker screamed and pleaded for the money. Ben, trying to be helpful, reached for the manual override button. In the old world, the override would vanish the freeze. The money would leave. The bank would be liable. In the new world, the unbreaking journal acted as a backstop. Tick 502. Agent Ben initiates override. Tick 503. Conflict detected. Agent attempts to reverse high-confidence vector decision. Tick 504. Escalation protocol. Override denied. Requires senior manager sign-off. The journal refused to let the human erase the machine's warning without a documented, high-level command. It saved Ben from his own empathy. It broke the spell of the social engineer. The shield of truth. 6 months later, the regulator sat in Evelyn's office. They demanded to know the exact moment the bank decided to trust or distrust the customer. Evelyn didn't hand over a messy text log. She opened the visualizer. She projected the causal chain onto the screen. "Here is the SIM swap event at 9 o'clock, she said. "Here is the vector card trigger at 9:05. Here is the attempted human override at 9:10. And here," she pointed, "is the journal's block. It preserved the truth of the threat against the pressure of the moment." The regulator closed the file. "The chain proves," he muttered. The unbreaking journal had transformed the bank's defense from a black box of mystery into a glass box of proof. It protected the customer from the hacker, and it protected the bank from the regulator. Evelyn had built the eyes, vector cards, and the memory, the journal. But as she watched the red dots on the global map, she felt a new anxiety. Her defenses were strong, but they were static. The enemy was evolving every hour. If she didn't find a way to test her defenses against the future, she would eventually lose. She needed a place to fail safely. She needed a war room where she could crash the system without hurting a single customer. She needed the perfect simulator. Part 3. The Adaptive Frontline. The Story of Self-Tuning Defense. Chapter 6. The Perfect Simulator. A Rehearsal for War. Evelyn has built a formidable defense. She has the vector card to detect the betrayal and the unbreaking journal to record the truth. But she is facing a new problem. The enemy is mutating. The SIM swappers are learning. The mule rings are changing their patterns. The clock is ticking on every single rule she has deployed. Evelyn knows she needs to update her vector cards. She needs to tighten the dials. She needs to change the logic. But she is terrified. In the world of enterprise banking, changing a rule on the live system is like performing open-heart surgery on a marathon runner while he is sprinting. If she makes the rule too loose, she misses the new attack, the false negative. If she makes the rule too tight, she commits friendly fire. She blocks 10,000 legitimate payments. The payroll transfer fails. The bank's reputation collapses. This fear creates the stagnant mind. Security teams are so afraid of breaking the business that they leave the old, obsolete rules in place. They choose to be slow rather than sorry. Evelyn refuses to be stagnant, but she refuses to gamble. She walks out of the war room and into the vault. The digital rehearsal room, the vault, is not where the money is kept. It is where time is kept. Inside the vault is the perfect simulator. This is not a QA environment. It is a war game. It uses the unbreaking journal to reconstruct exactly what happened in the past. Every login, every click, every transfer, creating a perfect, high-fidelity ghost of the bank's history. It allows Evelyn to travel back in time to last Tuesday or last year and replay the war, but with one crucial difference. She can change the weapons. She can ask, what would have happened if I had deployed this new defense 6 months ago? The case of the spoofed CEO. Evelyn sits at the console. She wants to test a defense against BC, business email compromise. She remembers the case of Thomas, the IT director. He lost $50,000 because a fraudster spoofed a vendor invoice. In the old world, the bank only saw the money leaving. They didn't see the email. But the Sentinel sees the instruction Evelyn configures the airlock to ingest the invoice metadata attached to the corporate payment portal. Now, the system can see the sender's email domain. Evelyn drafts a new vector card strategy. Block any SWIFT transfer $10,000 if the vendor email domain has changed in the last 7 days. In the old world, she would have to deploy this to the live battlefield and pray. In the vault, she loads the living ledger for the past 12 months. She presses, Run War Game. The simulator spins up. It replays millions of transactions in seconds. It reruns the Thomas event. Result: the new card fires. It detects the domain change from vendor.com to vend0r.com. It intercepts the $50,000 theft. Thomas is saved. Evelyn smiles, but the simulation isn't finished. The kamikaze agent. The simulator keeps running. It reaches a quiet Thursday in November. Alert! The new card strikes a friendly target. It blocks a $500,000 transfer. Context: it is the bank's own CFO paying for a massive server upgrade. The legitimate vendor had updated their email domain that morning. Evelyn watches the disaster unfold on the screen. In this alternate timeline, the payment fails. The vendor cancels the contract. The bank's IT upgrade stalls. The CFO is furious. She realizes she almost deployed a kamikaze agent. She had built a defense that killed the enemy, but also blew up the ship. If she had deployed this live, the friendly fire would have cost her job. Tuning the future, Evelyn does not panic. She hits reset. She's safe in the sandbox. She hasn't lost $1. She has just learned a valuable tactical lesson. She tweaks the dial. The email check is too aggressive, she decides. Let's add a contextual constraint. She updates the vector card. Block only if vendor email changed and the invoice contains urgency keywords. She runs the war game again. Thomas case. The fraudster used the words immediate payment required. Blocked. Thomas is saved. CFO case. The legitimate vendor invoice was standard. No urgency keywords. Passed. The business runs smoothly. Expanding the scope. The investment scam. Encouraged, Evelyn looks at another cold case. Derek, the victim of an investment scam. Derek transferred money to a crypto broker voluntarily. The bank missed it because the transaction looked authorized. Evelyn realizes the signal wasn't in the banking app, it was upstream. She configures the airlock to ingest referrer data from the mobile session. She rewinds the tape to Derek's login. She sees it. Derek didn't just open the app. He clicked a deep link from a high-risk ad domain on social media just seconds before logging in. She programs a new vector card. Flag any transfer, $1,000 if the session originated from a known scam referrer. She runs the simulation. Derek is saved. The provable ROI. Evelyn leans back. She has found the geodesic path, the perfect line between safety and friction. She generates a provable ROI report. It reads, simulation results 12 months, fraud prevented $2.40 million, friendly fire, false positives, 0, net profit impact plus $2, $4 million. She walks out of the vault. She is no longer guessing. She is deploying a battle-tested fact. But Evelyn is only one person. She cannot manually run war games for thousands of rules every day. She needs a partner. She needs an entity that can live inside the vault, running these tactical rehearsals 24/7, hunting for the perfect strategy while she sleeps. She needs the architect agent. Chapter 7. The architect agent, tuning the dials. Evelyn is tired. In Chapter 6, she successfully tuned the defense against the Beak attack. She saved Thomas. She saved the CFO. She proved the ROI. But it took her 4 hours. She looks at the dashboard of the bank. There are 2,000 active vector cards protecting 50 million customers. There are cards for romance scams, cards for crypto fraud, cards for check kiting. Each card has 3 or 4 dials, those tunable parameters she engineered in Chapter 4. What is the risk threshold? What is the time window? What is the dollar limit? She does the math. That is 8,000 dials. If she spends 4 hours tuning each one, she will be finished in 3 years. By then, the fraudsters will have invented 10 new ways to steal the money. She realizes that the perfect simulator is a powerful engine, but she is the bottleneck. She is a human trying to manually tune a machine that is infinitely complex. She needs a partner. She needs something that can live inside the vault, something that doesn't sleep, doesn't drink coffee, and can run 10,000 simulations a night. She needs the architect agent. The meta AI, the architect, is not a security guard. It doesn't look for hackers. It looks for efficiency. It is a meta AI. Its job is to manage the other AIs. Evelyn assigns the architect to the Money Mule vector card. This card detects the Alex pattern, money coming in and going out quickly. But the dials are tricky. If the velocity window is too tight, for example 5 minutes, it misses mules who wait an hour. If the velocity window is too loose, for example 24 hours, it flags every student who pays their rent the day they get their paycheck. Evelyn hands the tuning contract to the architect. She opens the search space. Here are the dials, she tells the architect. You can set the time window anywhere between 10 minutes and 48 hours. You can set the risk score anywhere between 50 and 99. Find the best combination. The golden rule, the economic reward. But before the architect can start, it asks one question. How do I win? If Evelyn says, stop all fraud, the architect will set the dial to block everything. It will become a kamikaze if Evelyn says, don't annoy customers. The architect will set the dial to block nothing. It will become a pacifist. Evelyn must act as the economist. She gives the architect the reward function, the mathematical definition of the bank's conscience. The golden rule, maximize net profit. Calculation, total fraud stopped, minus total cost of false positives. She tells the agent, a false positive costs us $150 in support calls and lost trust. A true positive saves us $4,000 in theft. Now, the architect has a compass. The tireless tester. Evelyn goes home to sleep. Inside the vault, the architect wakes up. It begins the optimization loop. Trial 1, proposal. Set window to 30 minutes, set threshold to $500. Simulation, it runs the last year of history. Result, it stops 90% of fraud, but blocks 5,000 legitimate rent payments. Score, negative $200,000. Too aggressive. Trial 5,402. The sun is coming up outside. The architect is still running. It is testing combinations no human would ever think of. It notices a subtle pattern in the living ledger. It notices that real students rarely transfer money between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m., but mule rings operate 24/7 to move money across time zones. Proposal. Set window to 60 minutes, but drop the threshold to $200 if the time is between 3 a.m. and 5 a.m. Simulation. It catches the mules. It leaves the students alone. Score. Positive $3.2 million. Preparing the broadcast. But the architect's job is not just to protect Evelyn's bank. It has a second, secret mandate driven by the need for self-preservation against the balloon effect, the external threat. Evelyn has instructed it, when you find a winning configuration, a causal signature that stops a new attack with 0 friendly fire, package it. The architect flags the winning logic, candidate for broadcast. It strips away the customer data. It isolates the pure geometry of the attack. It prepares this logic not just for deployment to Evelyn's live system, but for transmission to the outside world. The architect is not just tuning a shield, it is forging a blueprint for the entire industry. It is preparing to turn Evelyn's private victory into a public good. The handoff. When Evelyn arrives at work the next morning, there is a report waiting on her screen. It is the provable ROI report. The architect says, I have tested 10,000 configurations. I have found the global optimum. If you deploy these settings, we will save an additional $3.2 million this year with a 98% reduction in customer complaints. Evelyn looks at the numbers. She looks at the graph. She didn't have to guess. She didn't have to argue with the product team about friction. The math has solved the argument. She has successfully tuned the enterprise while she slept. But as she looks at the report, she notices something else. The architect found the perfect settings for general fraud, but the report shows a small cluster of failures. The settings are perfect for most people, but they are failing for the elderly and the very young. She realizes that a one-size-fits-all defense, even a perfectly tuned one, is still flawed. She doesn't need one perfect mind. She needs a team. She needs the multi-mind defense. Part 4, Building a Team of Specialists. The Story of Trust and Control. Chapter 8, The Multi-Mind Defense. Evelyn is looking at the architect's report on the surface. It is a triumph. The architect found the global optimum, saving the bank $3.2 million. But Evelyn digs deeper into the data. She looks at the edges of the curve, the customers who didn't fit the average. She sees Helen is 70 years old. The global optimum model let a $5,000 scam transfer go through because mathematically, blocking it would cause too much friction for the average user. Then she sees Alex. Alex is a mule. The model blocked him, but only after 3 transactions because it waited too long trying to avoid a false positive. Evelyn realizes the flaw. She has built one perfect mind, but the bank serves 50 million different people. By optimizing for the average, she is failing the edges. She realizes that a Sentinel cannot have just one personality. It needs a portfolio. The team of specialists. Evelyn goes back to the vault. She scraps the idea of a single fraud vector card. Instead, she creates 3 distinct agents, giving them different names, jobs, and reward functions. 1. The conservative agent, the Bodyguard. Target. Vulnerable customers like Helen. The mandate. Your job is safety. I do not care about speed. I do not care about friction. If you have even a 1% doubt, you stop the car. The tuning, the architect, tunes this agent to be a pacifist regarding risk. It takes 0 chances. 2. The aggressive agent, the hunter. Target. High-risk actors like Alex. The mandate. Your job is neutralization. If you see the mule signature, high velocity, threshold avoidance, you shoot to kill. Do not wait for 3 transactions. The tuning, the architect tunes this agent to be a kamikaze against fraud. 3. The balanced agent, the teller. Target, the general population and the CFO. The mandate. Your job is flow. Keep commerce moving. Only stop the obvious threats. The Overmind Orchestrator. But now, Evelyn faces a new problem. A transaction comes in for $500. The hunter wants to block it. The teller wants to approve it. The bodyguard wants to hold it. If she leaves them to fight, the system will crash. She needs a strategic layer. She builds the Overmind. The Overmind is the triage nurse of the digital fortress. It does not look at the risk. It looks at the context. Its job is to route the transaction to the correct specialist. Let's watch the Overmind handle 3 different customers in real shut time. Case 1. The vulnerable customer, Helen. A transaction arrives from Helen. The Overmind sees the tag. Vulnerability_flag. True. It decides. This customer is fragile. Safety is paramount. It routes her to the bodyguard. The bodyguard sees a new payee and triggers a soft block. Helen is annoyed, but her money is safe. The system treated her with equity, not equality. Case 2. The high-velocity mule, Alex. A transaction arrives from Alex. The Overmind sees device_cluster, high. It decides this looks like a tactical threat. It routes him to the hunter. The hunter sees the threshold avoidance pattern and fires a hard freeze. The laundering ring is broken. Case 3. The VIP, the CFO. A transaction arrives from the CFO. The Overmind sees tier VIP_corporate. It decides this is the lifeblood of the business. It routes him to the teller. The teller verifies the vendor and approves the transfer in 200 milliseconds. The limit of the machine. Evelyn has built a fortress that is smart enough to know the difference between a grandmother and a gangster. The strategic ledger proves it. But even the Overmind has limits. There is a final class of problem, the grey area. The moment when the Overmind is confused, the hunter is unsure, and the bodyguard is silent. The moment when the risk score lands on 0.55, not safe, not fraud, just ambiguous. In the old world, the machine would guess. In the Sentinel's world, we teach the machine to stop. We teach it to stop and ask for help. Chapter 9. The Overmind Orchestrator. To solve the chaos of the lobby, Evelyn builds the Overmind. It is not a 4th specialist. It is the strategic layer. While the hunter, bodyguard, and teller are obsessed with the transaction, the money, the device, the velocity, the Overmind is obsessed with the customer. Its job is strategic delegation. The triage master. Think of the Overmind as the triage nurse for the digital fortress. In an emergency room, you do not let the specialist fight over a patient. The triage nurse looks at the patient and says, "You go to orthopedics, you go to cardiology." The overmind performs this same function for the bank. It is the supreme intelligence that sits above the specialists, ensuring they never fight, only execute. Evelyn programs the overmind with a glass box logic script. It is a set of routing rules based on who the customer is, not just what they are doing. Let's watch the overmind handle 3 different customers in real time. Case 1. The vulnerable customer, Helen. A transaction arrives. It is Helen, the 70-year-old retired teacher, trying to send $5,000 to a tech support agent. So, the overmind wakes up. It looks at the CRM profile. It sees a tag, vulnerability_flag, true. The overmind makes a strategic decision. This customer is fragile. Speed is irrelevant. Safety is paramount. It routes the transaction to the Bodyguard agent, the conservative model. The system worked because it treated her with equity, not equality. Case 2. The high-velocity mule, Alex. A transaction arrives. It is Alex moving $950 using a device seen on 3 other accounts. The overmind checks the profile. Age 20, device_cluster, high. The overmind decides, this looks like a tactical threat. It routes the transaction to the hunter agent, the aggressive model. The hunter sees the threshold avoidance pattern and fires a hard freeze. Alex is stopped cold. Case 3, the VIP, the CFO. A transaction arrives. It is the CFO paying a vendor. The overmind checks the profile. Tier VIP_corporate. Tenure 15 years. The overmind decides, this is the lifeblood of the business. Do not obstruct without cause. It routes to the teller agent, the balanced model. The teller approves the transfer in 200 milliseconds. The double ledger. The beauty of the overmind is that it is auditable. We now have 2 layers of truth in our unbreaking journal. 1. The strategic ledger, the overmind. I routed Helen to the Bodyguard because she is flagged as vulnerable. 2. The tactical ledger, the specialist. I, the Bodyguard, blocked Helen because she is paying a new payee. Evelyn has built a fortress that is smart enough to know the difference between a grandmother and a gangster. But even the overmind has limits. There is a final class of problem, the grey area. The moment when the overmind is confused, the hunter is unsure, and the Bodyguard is silent. The moment when the machine simply does not know. In the old world, the machine would guess. In the Sentinel's world, we teach the machine to stop. We teach it to stop and ask for help. Part 5. The Accountable Fortress. The Story of Trust and Control. Chapter 10. The arbiter loop, the human constraint. A magnificent machine is built. The overmind sits at the top, routing traffic like a strategic general. The hunter, Bodyguard, and teller execute their orders with ruthless efficiency. But even this multi-mind system has a potential flaw common to all artificial intelligence. The flaw of arrogance. The source. Most AI systems are designed to force an answer. If you show a neural network a picture of a cloud that looks vaguely like a dog, it will not say, I don't know. It will say, dog, 51%. It guesses. In a banking fortress, guessing is dangerous. A 51% guess means you're flipping a coin with a family's livelihood. If the machine guesses wrong, it either blocks a life-saving surgery payment or lets a criminal drain a pension. We need to teach our Sentinels something that no black box has ever learned. Humility. This is why, back in Chapter 4, Evelyn added that specific field to the vector card. Human_context_required. Now, we see why that architectural choice was the most important one she made. The grey area. The conflict has arrived. The Overmind has frozen a transfer for $12,000. It has calculated the risk score. It lands on 0.55. It is the definition of the grey area. It is not clearly safe, and it is not clearly fraud. In the Sentinel's world, the Overmind hits the human constraint, activating this protocol Evelyn had wisely designed into the vector card architecture from the very beginning. It does not guess. It triggers the protocol Evelyn designed for this exact moment. I know that I do not know. The glass box request. The Overmind holds the transaction in a state of suspended enigma. It sends a signal to the human command center. This is not a vague Alert 404. It is a glass box request. Imagine a digital dossier landing on the desk of David, a senior fraud analyst. David opens the file. He does not see a raw database row. He sees the Sentinel's reasoning ledger. Line 1. Hunter. Agent flagged unusual velocity. Score 0.6. Line 2. Teller agent flagged legitimate invoice match. Score 0.4. Line 3. Conflict detected. Risk. Score 0.55 is ambiguous. Line 4. Protocol activated. Human context required field is true. Line 5. Action paused, awaiting arbiter judgment. The machine is speaking to David. It is saying, I have done the math, and the math is inconclusive. I need intuition. I need you. The human in the loop. David looks at the case. He sees something the machine missed. He sees that the invoice attached to the payment is for a wedding venue. He looks at the customer's history and sees they bought a diamond ring 6 months ago. The machine cannot understand marriage. It only understands numbers. But David understands the human narrative. The high velocity isn't money laundering, it's a deposit deadline. David presses the button. Approve, closing the loop. When David makes his decision, he is not just unlocking the door. He is teaching the machine. The unbreaking journal records a new permanent fact. Line 6, Arbiter. Decision, approved. Line 7, Authority, Analyst David. Line 8, Reason, Human Context, Life Event. The Sentinel reads this line. It updates its own memory. It learns that wedding venue, diamond ring, purchase safe. This is the closed loop. We have achieved meaningful human control. We have built a system that is efficient enough to run at light speed, but humble enough to stop and ask for directions. We are almost done. We need to deploy the final product into the real world without breaking the bank. We need the zero event. Chapter 11. Zero Event Accountability, the Strategic Weapon. Evelyn sits in her office. It is 2 p.m. on a Tuesday. The bank is bustling. Millions of transactions are flowing through the pipes. In the old world, if Evelyn wanted to update the bank's fraud defences, she would have to wait until 3 a.m. on a Sunday. She would gather a war room of exhausted engineers. Deployment was a trauma. It was a slow, clumsy manoeuvre that the enemy counted on. The fraudster knew that if they invented a new attack on Monday, the bank wouldn't patch the hole until next month. They had a 30-day window of impunity. But today, Evelyn is drinking a coffee. She is reading the provable ROI report from the architect agent. It recommends a new tuning for the hunter agent to catch the latest mule ring pattern. It predicts a savings of $500,000 this month. Evelyn presses a button marked Comet. Nothing seems to happen. The lights don't flicker. The alarms don't ring. The engineers don't panic. But deep inside the machine, the universe has shifted. This is the zero event deployment, and it is the most dangerous weapon the bank possesses. The line in the sand. How did she change the engine of the plane while it was flying? She used the unbreaking journal. When Evelyn pressed Commit, she didn't overwrite code. She didn't reboot a server. She simply wrote a new line into the ledger. Line 9001. System update. Set Hunter _ threshold to 0.85. Timestamp. Tick 602. This timestamp is a mathematical line in the sand. 1. Transaction A arrives at tick 601. The system checks the ledger. It sees the old rule. It lets the transaction pass. 2. The zero event occurs at tick 602. The rule updates instantly. 3. Transaction B arrives at tick 603. The system checks the ledger. It sees the new rule. It recognizes transaction B as a mule. It blocks it. There was no downtime. There was no ambiguity. There was just a seamless atomic handoff from the old law to the new law. Breaking the adversary's loop. This speed is not about efficiency. It is about war. The Invisible Adversary is fast. They spin up a new phishing site in minutes. They recruit a new mule in hours. The adversary is betting on the bank being slow. This capability proves the architecture is built to defeat that bet. But with zero event deployment, Evelyn has broken the enemy's loop. The enemy invents a tactic at 9 a.m. The vector card detects the signature at 10 a.m. The architect agent tunes the defense at 11 a.m. Evelyn deploys the fix at 12 p.m. By the time the fraudster tries the attack again after lunch, the door is already locked. The zero event capability is a strategic weapon that denies the fraudster their main window of opportunity. The perfect memory of change. 3 weeks later, a regulator audits the bank. They point to transaction B. Why did you block this, they ask. Yesterday, you let a similar transaction through. Are you being arbitrary? In the old world, Evelyn would struggle to answer. We updated the model, she would say vaguely. I think it was on Tuesday. In the accountable fortress, Evelyn pulls up the audit scope. She shows the regulator the timeline. You are correct, she says. At tick 601, our policy allowed this behaviour, but at tick 602, our architect agent identified a new threat vector. We deployed a patch instantly. Transaction B occurred at tick 603, so it was subject to the new defense. She shows them the provable ROI report linked to that specific tick ID. We didn't change the rule arbitrarily, she says. We changed it because the data proved it was necessary to protect the bank. The regulator closes the file. There are no further questions. The audit trail is not just clear. It is absolute. Ready for the network, Evelyn puts down her coffee. She has achieved internal velocity. She has built a fortress that can learn and adapt at the speed of software. But as she looks at the screen, she realises that saving her own bank is not enough. The fraudster she just blocked is not going to retire. He is going to walk down the street to Bank B. Evelyn has a weapon that works. Keeping it to herself feels negligent. She realised that the zero event capability isn't just for deploying rules internally. It is the engine that could power a global immune system. If she can update her own fortress in milliseconds, why can't she update the industry? She looks at the broadcast button. Chapter 12. The Network of Trust. The fraudster is a rational economic actor. When Evelyn raised the drawbridge of her accountable fortress in Chapter 11, the fraudster didn't give up on crime. He simply looked at the math. Cost of attacking Evelyn's bank, high. Success rate, near zero. Solution, move down the street. He targets Bank B. Bank B is smaller. It doesn't have an architect agent. It doesn't have an unbreaking journal. It is still operating with a stagnant mind. This is the balloon effect. When you squeeze crime in one place, it bulges in another. In the old world, Evelyn would have called this a victory. Not my bank, not my problem. But Evelyn's perfect simulator has shown her a terrifying truth. Her biggest corporate clients, the ones the teller agent is working so hard to protect, have supply chains that run through Bank B. If Bank B gets hit by a massive BC attack, Evelyn's client doesn't get their parts. The factory stops. Evelyn's bank loses the transaction volume. She realizes that isolation is a liability. To protect her own fortress, she must inoculate the ecosystem. She needs to use her new internal velocity to power a global immune system. She needs to build the network of trust. The problem of silence. For 50 years, banks have fought fraud in silos. Bank A knows that a specific mule ring is using a new velocity pattern. They block it. Bank B has no idea. They get hit by the same ring the next day. The defenders operate as islands. Why don't they warn each other? Because of privacy. Bank A cannot email Bank B a list of suspicious accounts. That would violate regulatory constraints and customer trust. So, they stay silent. The silence protects the data, but it aids the enemy. The fraudsters, meanwhile, have no such constraints. They share scripts on the dark web. They operate as a federation. The causal broadcast. In the Sentinel's world, we can break the silence without breaking privacy. Remember the vector card. It is a logic script. It describes the geometry of a crime, not the identity of the criminal. It does not say, John Smith is a thief. It says if you see a transaction sequence of ABC within 10 minutes, that is a high-risk mule pattern. This distinction changes everything. Evelyn's architect agent has discovered a new attack vector. It has tuned a new vector card to stop it. Instead of keeping this card in her vault, Evelyn presses a button. Broadcast. She does not broadcast customer names. She broadcasts the logic. She sends the vector card to the Sentinel network, a secure, shared library of causal signatures accessible to every bank in the alliance. The romance scam, the network's killer app. Why is this essential? Because some crimes are invisible to a single bank. Consider Aisha. Aisha is sending money to a fiancé. To Evelyn's bank, her payments look like love. They are slow, authorized, and consistent. Even the Bodyguard agent struggles to find a reason to block them without traumatizing the customer. But when Evelyn connects to the Sentinel network, the picture changes. The network sees what Evelyn cannot. It sees that the device ID receiving Aisha's money is also receiving love gifts from 20 other women at 5 different banks. Bank A sees romance. Bank B sees romance. The network sees predation. The network generates a cross-bank vector card. It pushes an alert to Evelyn's overmind. Block this payee. Reason, persona reuse detected across 5 institutions. The network turned a romance into a RICO case. The speed of immunity. Let's watch the fraudster attack Bank B again. He uses his new technique, the deepfake voice scam. He assumes Bank B hasn't seen it yet. But 10 minutes ago, Bank B's architect agent received a subscription update from the network. It downloaded Evelyn's new vector card. It deployed it via a zero-event update. The fraudster calls Bank B. He launches the attack. Bank B's system recognizes the geometry immediately. Blocked. The fraudster is stunned. He tries Bank C. blocked. This is herd immunity. Because one sentinel learned the lesson, every sentinel learned the lesson. The time to protection for the entire financial system dropped from months to milliseconds. Evelyn has not just secured her bank, she has secured the horizon.